All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today we're diving into a pretty intense constitutional crisis scenario. Imagine a showdown set in the very near future between a president and Congress. It's a situation that could really test the limits of American democracy. Okay, so let's get right to the heart of it. Can a U.S. president actually send troops into a conflict without getting a thumbs up from Congress? This one question is at the center of our whole Explainer today, and frankly, the answer has been a source of tension for decades. And believe it or not, a huge part of the answer comes down to this one number: 60 days. Now, this isn't just some random number pulled out of a hat. It's a deadline written right into law, and it's basically a tripwire for a constitutional showdown between the two most powerful branches of government. So to make this real, let's play out a hypothetical. Imagine it's September 4th, 2025, and a hypothetical President Trump decides to initiate military action somewhere in the world. Now, fast forward to today, November 1st. That 60-day clock, it just ran out. And here's the kicker. Congress hasn't given its approval. So what happens now? Well, to really get what's going on, we've got to look at the rulebook that both sides are supposedly playing by. This is where the fight really heats up. And this is the rulebook right here, the War Powers Resolution of 1973. You know, this whole thing came about in the shadow of the Vietnam War, for one specific reason: to stop a president from single-handedly dragging the country into a long, drawn-out war. The idea is simple. After 60 days, you need Congress's okay. It's meant to be the constitutional emergency brake. And this is where you can really see the tension built right into the system. On one hand, you've got the president, the commander-in-chief, who needs to be able to act fast, right? But on the other hand, Congress holds the big cards, the power to officially declare war, and maybe more importantly, the money to pay for it. The problem, and the source material really hammers this home, is that presidents have a long history of pushing those boundaries, while Congress, well, they've often had a tough time pushing back effectively. And look, this isn't some new 2025 problem, not at all. If you look back, the source material is super clear that this is a recurring pattern, a constitutional drama that is played out time and time again. I mean, you can trace this all the way back to the law's creation. Think about it. It was passed over President Nixon's veto. That tells you right there how the executive branch feels about these kinds of limits. From President Johnson ramping things up in Vietnam, which is what started this whole law, to President Bush's actions in Iraq, the story is pretty much the same. Presidents, regardless of party, tend to stretch their authority as far as they can, often leaving Congress scrambling to play catch-up. Yeah, this quote from the source material just nails it. The argument here is that this hypothetical situation isn't some kind of weird one-off. Nope, it's just the latest episode in a long-running series about a power shift. A shift towards the executive branch and away from the legislative branch. Okay, so you might be thinking, this is all just a DC political fight. Why does it matter to me? Well, it turns out this constitutional tug of war has some huge stakes for American democracy and for America's role in the world. According to the source, when Congress doesn't step up and use its authority, the fallout is pretty serious. At home, it chips away at that core democratic idea of shared power. It means huge life and death decisions can be made with less accountability, and internationally, it can really damage the country's credibility with its allies and lead to all sorts of unstable situations. Oh, and it does all this while racking up a bill that was never really debated or approved by the people's representatives. The author uses this really powerful image of crumbling pillars to get this point across. And this chart kind of shows you what that looks like. Ideally, you have this nice, even balance between the three branches. But the source argues the reality is, well, it's way out of whack. You've got this supersized executive branch, and the legislative branch's power has just been whittled down, creating a system that's dangerously off balance. So yeah, that all sounds pretty grim. But it's not a lost cause. The source is actually pretty clear that there's a path forward for Congress to step back in, flex its constitutional muscles, and get things back in balance. And it's not some magic formula. It's really about Congress using the tools it has always had. First, hold public hearings, shine a bright light on what's happening. Second, and this is crucial, force a vote, a clear up or down vote on whether to continue the military action. And finally, use the ultimate leverage, the power of the purse. If Congress hasn't approved the action, they can choose not to fund it. It's as simple as that. So at the end of the day, here's the big takeaway. This isn't just some abstract legal debate for scholars to argue about. This gets to the very core of how the U.S. government is supposed to work. Because if you just let this question of war powers slide, you're basically saying it's okay for a president to decide all on their own to go to war. And that leaves us with one last, pretty heavy question to chew on. The whole system of checks and balances was designed to be self correcting, right? But what happens when it isn't? When one branch consistently overpowers another and that other branch fails to push back? Who then is ultimately responsible for fixing the balance? That's something to think about.